Hi, everyone. Super excited to welcome you to this community town hall of Langfuse. It's the beginning of Q4, October 2025. And as every quarter, we are doing this town hall. There's like a recorded meeting. In the end, the recording and transcript will be on YouTube to share with the larger community. And the whole purpose is to basically give an update of what happened over the last 3 months on Langfuse. So especially if you're like a user of the product, contributor to the product, and you wonder what's going on with Langfuse, then you can use this meeting to get up to speed of all of the latest changes. And then we concluded the planning for what's like very much top of mind for the community for the next quarter and finalize our like rough roadmap idea for the next couple of weeks. So I'll also give you like an update of what's coming there. Rough overview, quick introduction, quick glimpse at the current state of the project. And then I'll do like a rapid fire of all of the things that we released over the last 3 months. So this will be like a fun set of demos. The list is getting longer every quarter. I hope I can sustain this for the next year. And then we'll discuss the Q4 roadmap. So what's top of mind, what's coming, to give you like an idea where the product is headed. If you have any questions and feedback on this, please submit these notes either here via the meeting in the Q&A section or via GitHub. And yeah, then we have lots of time for Q&A, feedback, or whatever wish list items you might have where you want to see the project going. High level, the best way to contribute to Langfuse is basically via GitHub discussions, either via langfuse.com/ideas. So if you want things to improve, change, new product areas, features, please create like a thread on GitHub. And all maintainers are extremely active on GitHub discussions because this is like our public community forum where we like to work with all Langfuse users. And there's also langfuse.com/support, which is like an out there in the open support channel if you want help by maintainers. If you're a user of Langfuse Cloud, you can also like email a support engineer from within the product. So there's like this like a new support tool within the product, but this public channel also works really well. High level, where do we stand today? Langfuse stands at almost 15 million SDK installs a month, with like notable companies using it, such as Twilio, Khan Academy, Merck, Samsara, like generally like big logos where the large segments are platform teams in like large-scale enterprises, AI native startups, and lots of builders and open source contributors. I'm really, really excited about this. We crossed 17,000 stars very recently, 6 million Docker polls. So I'm just like, as like one of the founders and maintainers, I'm really excited to see the product grow since we started it in 2023. And yeah, it just continues to grow a lot. And off of basically this traction, we also began to expand the team more. So here on the right side, you basically see like the whole team as we met together in Portugal recently, because parts of the team are located in San Francisco and parts of the team are in Berlin in Germany. So yeah, currently we are like a team of 12, and we are also actively expanding the team if you're excited about working on this space, working on these problems, working with these customers. Yeah, it's very fun to build this in open source. High level, where does Langfuse stand today? It's a suite of generally like 3 different product areas. One, like the observability tooling, which has been like our core data foundation from the get-go, and where I have like very like strong takes that it needs production agent tracing to then power all evaluation, monitoring workflows, this kind of like the key piece to get right. And we invest like heavily as a team of maintainers into the observability stack. Then prompt management drives a lot of like collaboration between different kinds of people within application teams. So since the launch in early 2024, it's been super popular, and many teams even onboard just for prompt management. And evaluation is something that continues to grow a lot, where teams, when they grow in maturity, they go from observability more to evaluation, and then do like online monitoring of what's happening in production and like more offline benchmarking testing. And yeah, you'll see in the last and next quarter a lot of releases on all of these 3 areas. And underneath is like our general data platform, where I mean, with Langfuse, we want to be the most open, well-integrated project in the space. I mean, we lead on like the open source metrics, but we really want to be extremely easy to integrate and embeddable within like a larger platform architecture, whatever kind of like workflows you really want to build. So that if you want to do something custom, you can do it with Langfuse, because we have APIs for that. So that's the high-level overview again. And let's jump into the major releases of the last 3 months. So this will be a fun time of some demos. If you have any questions while I go through this, just a reminder, feel free to use the tooling in the bottom right corner to queue like questions that we can address later. So we'll start with agents, where generally we've rebuilt a lot of things in Langfuse to be more helpful when building agents. So we can explore this as part of this interactive demo project that everyone has access to when signing up for Langfuse Cloud. So we can, for example, ask, what is Langfuse? How does it work? So this is just like a very simple application that uses the Langfuse MCP server that's also available, for example, for your like cursor or Cloud Code usage, that then can get documentation overviews, fetch single documentation pages, ask like RAG kind of questions to the documentation, and then we get a response. Cool. And for these kinds of more agentic use cases where you have like some like reasoning or tool use, we have rebuilt the Langfuse tracing UI to account for them in a better way. So for example, when we now open this trace, we can see we have these new icons for the different kinds of types of spans that happen within a trace. And this agent graph that initially only existed for LangGraph now is generalized and works across agent frameworks or when you instrument something manually. This is based on the observation types, where we now support, next to the event span and generation that existed from day one in Langfuse, we now also support agents, tools, chains, retrievers, evaluators, embeddings, and guardrails. And we will continuously launch new types depending on how basically architectures shift across our user base. And when you, for example, instrument manually via the SDK, you can just add them at like as type. If you use one of the framework integrations, we automatically label the different observations with the corresponding types. If something of here is not perfect, please raise an issue and we'll fix it. Then there is these agent graphs that I mentioned, which now work generalized across agent frameworks, which is really exciting. And since yesterday or the day before, there's also now like a log view, which is currently in beta, which basically, instead of like you going through the individual observations one by one here in the general preview, you can also just now view a log of all of these things, where for some agent debugging use case, just seeing a chronological view is easier. Yes, that's it for agents from the last quarter. Then also we launched in end of August, Haseeb launched the TypeScript SDK version 4, which basically finalizes our full migration to OpenTelemetry as a transport, which is really cool because it drives a lot of like interoperability and general developer experience of these integrations. So for example, the TypeScript SDK now also has a context manager-based implementation where you can just start an active observation, use a callback to then execute whatever application logic, and you automatically get timings. And specifically, the kind of like nested context of observations is maintained, so you don't need to like pass around any kinds of Langfuse span objects that you needed to pass around before. We have a wrapper. So for example, if you have traced function, you can just add the observe wrapper around a function, and this will then automatically detect input, output, and timings as well. So this is like the most high-level abstraction that we have. And you can also go for fully manually. So this is very close to the core OpenTelemetry implementation. Yeah, this is really exciting because it basically now helps us standardize completely on instrumentation. And for example, if you want to use, I'd say like an ORM like Prisma, and you want to see Prisma spans and Langfuse, you just need to add auto instrumentation for OpenTelemetry for Prisma, and these spans can show up in Langfuse, but you can also filter them out if you don't care about them. As a reminder, this also exists for Python. Like all of this already exists for Python. Last quarter, we just now caught up with our Python developer experience on the TypeScript side as well with the SDK version 4. Really recommended to check it out and upgrade because it's generally way more performant, lower memory overhead. Like this is like a really, really, really cool upgrade. Then we move over to evaluations within Langfuse, where we launched the experiment SDK. What does that mean? basically, there's now the run experiment method across our SDKs, where you can provide like a name of an experiment description, a data, which is basically an array of different input-output pairs, and a task. And this is now the high-level extraction to run offline experiments on Langfuse data. This also works for data sets that you store in Langfuse. So you can run this kind of experiment. It makes it way easier to add concurrency, or when you then add evaluators, if you use evaluators, then these evaluators are available synchronously afterwards in the results, which then allows you to use Langfuse experiments, for example, in CI or some kind of like offline notebooks where you directly want to print the results. So there's no need to wait for something to happen within Langfuse. But you can also then view the experiment result in the Langfuse UI afterwards to share it with your colleagues. Regarding experiments, we now also support external experiments, which basically means within Langfuse datasets, as a recap, you have like items of different input-output pairs to run experiments, and then you can basically do like dataset runs against them, which we call experiments, and you can then run an experiment. There's this experiment via the user interface on a single prompt version, which we'll demo again later, but you can also do this via the SDK API, for example, via this experiment SDK that I just shown you. However, since last quarter, you can also add a webhook. So I now added this demo webhook from this debugging page. So I just double check. Perfect. We can now configure a webhook for a dataset and then hit run. We can configure some config, which is completely customizable, hit run. And now from the UI, for example, a non-technical user could start a new experiment, which then when we go to this webhook.site, we can see that Langfuse called this webhook with a project ID, dataset name, and the payload with these custom options. So now you could, for example, create like a GitHub Actions runner that can be triggered directly from the Langfuse UI, which just makes this process way more seamless in cases where you want to run an experiment against your actual application stack that you can only run within CI. So yeah, we closed the loop here for these external experiments. Then we dramatically improved the comparison view of datasets. As a recap, when you are on datasets and have different runs, you can basically select a couple and open the comparison view, where the comparison view then shows the results side by side. You can have a look at the data, check it out to see what the different I/O was. And now all of these scores are aligned next to each other. And you can then also filter by only seeing the results of different kinds of scores that apply for a single column. So for example, if we only care about the items that only have like contains PII 0 here, for example, then we could now do this and add a filter for this. So this comparison view improved a lot, and also over the next quarter, it will improve even more. Second to final thing on evals, dataset items are now searchable, which was something like a popular request. So if we, search for metrics, we can see that this thing has like a metrics item, which should make it way easier to find dataset items. Then on annotation queues, as a reminder, annotation queues are the product that helps you like label data and ask basically domain experts to go through traces and provide authoritative responses regarding these evaluation scores. There are a couple of new features available. One, you can, under the settings of an annotation queue, you can assign it to different people within your team. So it's clear who should work on what kind of annotation queue. And another exciting thing, you can now add sessions queues as well. So here we can add to an annotation queue. And finally, the score configurations. So for example, here we have these score configurations that go into annotation queues. These are now also updatable. They were like immutable in the past, so now you can mutate them. Yeah, that's it for evals. We can go deeper on prompts, but I heard that there was someone raising their hand. I would ask you to ask questions via the Q&A tooling within Google Meet, so we can queue these questions towards the end. Perfect. So if I continue, webhooks are something that is an extremely popular request by the community, and we started to launch webhooks for prompt management this quarter. So you can here add webhook URLs, or you could also configure a Slack integration. So you can also set up a Slack integration and then post as like a bot user to a channel whenever you make prompt changes. So basically, like if you, for example, want to be notified whenever prompt changes, you can do this now via webhooks. This has like a specific use when you want to persist prompts in a GitHub repository, where we have an example on how to basically use GitHub Actions to be notified about prompt changes, and then how to persist the current state of prompt management, like as a JSON file within your repository. So yeah, this is the GitHub integration. So you could set up this GitHub action and then point the prompt webhook to this GitHub action. For everyone using initn as a workflow builder, Langfuse now supports initn for prompt management, so you can use Langfuse prompts within initn workflows. Also in prompt management, we now support placeholders, meaning when you have a prompt and, for example, I mean, here we see variables within prompts. So for example, context and questions that are inserted into prompts of Langfuse prompt management. But now we also support placeholders. So for example, if you want to include a message history, I mean, I would usually insert it maybe here. Then at runtime, Langfuse prompt management can insert an array of, for example, chat messages at this point. Then we had a couple of improvements to the Langfuse playground, where we can now basically use split tests. So for example, who am I, or no, who are you is probably good and should be different between different prompt iterations, model iterations. So if we take for 1 and 5 mini and then run it against both models, we'll be able to see that these models will respond very differently to the question of like, who are you? With like GPT-5 mini being way more verbose about details and limits that are not available in GPT-4.1 response. Just like basically you can now create multiple split tests, scroll between them, sync them. So this is newly available. And Langfuse prompt management since last quarter also supports structured output. So for example, get weather is just like a schema for structured output, where you can create new data schemas, or also tools that can be attached. And you can also configure, like under additional options, additional recurse parameters that are sent to the model provider as just key value pieces. So yeah, that's also able to customize like prompt management even more. On the prompt experiment side, as a recap, this is basically a prompt in Langfuse, which you can then run against the data set based on the experiment configuration. Here, while setting this up, we, for one, now have this wizard, which makes it easier to actually configure this Langfuse prompt experiment. And you can also add structured output configurations, because a lot of the testing of prompts against data sets is for like extraction workflows, where being able to include a structured output schema is really helpful for Langfuse prompt experiments. Then we have a couple of interesting updates that are less core Langfuse related, but more Langfuse cloud related. So Langfuse cloud, generally, like as a recap, you can like self-host Langfuse for free under our like MIT open source license on your own infrastructure, or you can use Langfuse cloud as a managed service. Over the last quarter, we made Langfuse cloud way more attractive, because we significantly decreased the price of our core plan. So it's like really easy to get going. Plus, Langfuse pricing is now has this kind of like graduated pricing, where you don't need to negotiate with anyone in order to get good volume pricing as your use of Langfuse scales. So generally, we just want to make Langfuse cloud the like easiest way to use Langfuse, but we also really like that so many teams self-host Langfuse within their own infrastructure. Then we released our first AI feature within Langfuse, which was one of the things we built during our like annual offsite. So here under filters, we can now, for example, say from like we want all from today, and then basically we use AI in product to then directly derive these kinds of filters. Yeah, more of these AI features will be coming, and FYI, these are generally, let me see, where is it? Organization settings. These AI features are generally opt-in. So when you first want to use them, you can opt into them, and they are covered by all of the HIPAA, GDPR, ISO, SOC 2 compliance frameworks that we follow with Langfuse Cloud as well. So yeah, we are very like privacy and security conscious while rolling out these AI features, and they are opt-in generally for Langfuse projects. Then filters are like a key thing of how people work with data. And now all of the filters that are available in the UI, or very many of them, are now available via advanced filtering for the public traces API, where when we look at the API reference, wait, I'll use the deep link again, traces API reference. We find a new filter attribute on these APIs where you can basically use like a Langfuse query language via this JSON object to basic query and filter by different kinds of values within Langfuse. This can, for example, be like the user ID, name, session ID, metadata. And I think this is really exciting because it gives you like more customizability when loading data from Langfuse. On the billing side, because I touched on like reduced costs, Langfuse, like we really overhauled Langfuse Cloud billing over the last quarter, where when you now change a plan, generally like the whole upgrade downgrade flow should be much improved, and you can create billing alerts. So for example, for the usage-based component, if we just want to be alerted once we reach like, I don't know, 10 USD, for example, we can create an alert, and then Langfuse will just send you an email whenever within a month you hit this $10 mark for the very first time, which I think is really crucial when like pricing is mostly usage-based, that you have an idea of what to expect and be able to react to it. Then like not directly product related, but we published our like internal company handbook. So if you want to read up on basically why does Langfuse exist, who are our customers, how did we get there, why are we even open source, like all of these things, like we put a lot of thinking about how we build Langfuse, and we now basically published all of this in the public Langfuse company handbook. So if you just navigate to langfuse.com/handbook, you can read up on this, and also like lots of resources that we use internally of how to work at Langfuse or how we do things in like product engineering, go-to-market, internal operations. Maybe this is like a fun read. And finally, we made like large improvements to our website, where now it's easier to explore the different kinds of product areas. And also in the documentation, it's now way easier to, for example, onboard onto prompt management without being forced into observability, because these three are really like distinct product areas, and all of the documentation is now really split into the different product segments, the core product segments, and the more platform like auxiliary segments that Langfuse has. Yeah, that's it for the very brief demo of what happened in Q3. And I would now like share what's in it for Langfuse next quarter. Reminder, all of this is public, so langfuse.com/roadmap. You can read up on this. There are kind of like a couple of key focus areas for us for the next quarter. One is continue to push on agent observability, so making it easier to use Langfuse for really complex, long-running agents, making tool calling more debuggable, discoverable, so special rendering of how tool calls work across all of these traces, because often kind of like failure patterns are in more agentic applications related to how they use tools. So we want to really improve how this works on like a single trace level, but also like if you have like hundreds of thousands of traces with error patterns. And we further want to improve agent graphs, the agent logs that I showed you, and agent evals. On the eval side, we will release an initial version of our like evaluation score alignment comparison visualizations to benchmark how different evaluation scores perform on the same thing. So imagine you have some human annotation, you now want to contrast it with like an Elmo as a judge to understand how well it is aligned with the human annotation. So we'll build this out. We will release experiments as a first-class citizen and remove the dependency on data sets, so you can basically experiment on data that's not tracked in Langfuse, because many teams have like unit tests or experiments that are not really backed by a data set, or like it's not as clean as a data set of just having input-output pairs, but rather they're like unit tests in the application. So like you will see experiments show up as an distinct menu item in the UI, most likely. Then we'll continue to overhaul the experiment or dataset run comparison views to make it easier to contrast and learn from this data. We'll make it easier to manage data sets, so folders, schema enforcement, bulk adding traces to data sets. And we want to improve comments across the product to make qualitative evaluation workflows and collaboration more easy. On the Playground side, like Playground has improved a lot last quarter, but we also over the next weeks want to improve it a lot with regards to how to experiment with prompts and models in the Playground based then on like the last 100 times you called this prompt, for example, to directly jump to a grid of what happened in production, or directly use data sets to fill in this kind of more iterative Playground. So this is like high level what Playground will achieve over the next months. And therefore, to make Playground more robust, depending different kinds of models that you use, we'll introduce most likely like a Langfuse input-output data schema that's then used internally, which increases like compatibility of all of the different product features. And we are considering making the Playground more stateful and collaborative, so you can like share Playground sessions with other people in your team. On the UI UX side, there are so many teams like learning more about Langfuse and onboarding every day. And we just realized it's more and more relevant to nail the onboarding experience. So in case you ever want to onboard onto Langfuse again, this will become way more easy over the next weeks. We just want to dedicate more time to it. And we want to improve more of the like core screens, especially for newer or non-technical users. So like the trace UI is very powerful, but we can probably do some tweaks to the UI to make it even easier to use, or the prompt management screen to make it easier to use for less technical people who haven't seen like a GitHub GIST interface, for example, before. So these kinds of things are coming. And we see that for extremely large traces and data sets, at some point, sometimes the UI performance is not meeting the standards where we want to be. So we will also focus on like UI performance, so Langfuse gets really snappy for even larger traces and data sets. Underlying this, I'd say like a third or like half of our engineering effort goes into the underlying infrastructure data platform, because Langfuse has grown a lot over recent weeks and months. And we strongly want to increase ingestion throughput, response time, reduce error rates on the margin, especially for the read APIs. And this will be achieved by simplifying the core data model to really leverage like the underlying database structure that we use. High level, what does this mean for you? Not much. Like we plan to make the UI much more easy to use, especially in like nested agent scenarios. So we want to move to like an observation span only and immutable data model that aligns with these complex agents. And we want to build a more like customizable and intuitive filter interface to then dig into the data that you want to see, and basically deprecate traces as like a standalone entity, because in the end, it's just like the topmost observation of a trace ID. So yeah, this is like the biggest change in Q4. And yeah, we aim to make this as non-breaking as possible, and we'll invest into the SDKs to like ingest nice data to Langfuse so it can render the data really quickly and nicely. This will then also finally unlock that we can offer webhooks for observability and evaluation data. Currently, this is blocked because a lot of the like queries on Langfuse need joins, which are possible, but which are slow. So we are basically removing joins from our infrastructure in the most part, which then allows to be able to like notify on events or do stuff with and routing within the product feature between the different product features. So I'm extremely excited about this as well, that this is finally coming. This was roughly it for where we want to take it with roadmap. And thanks again, everyone, generally for the great discussions everywhere, especially on GitHub discussions, detailed bug reports, super, super helpful. And before we jump to like the more Q&A side of the call, quick reminder that we are hiring in Berlin and San Francisco. If you're really excited about the space, we're hiring basically across all kinds of engineering positions, so product, backend, design, support, customer solutions, but also commercially like customer success, as like very many teams onboard onto Langfuse, and we want to make them as successful as possible. If you're interested in like writing about the space or working with our community also on developer relations, we want to like bring on the first person who does this like full time. Like don't worry, you'll continue to see me on many of these calls because I really enjoy it, but I just feel like there's like such a big community that we can work with. So we want to bring on someone who is really excited to develop this community further, and like a generalist that wants to work with like the core maintainers and founders of Langfuse to push like special projects as like founders associate. If you're excited about any of this, like we have a careers page, and I'm super happy to chat. And now let's move on to the Q&A section of this call, where we have like 25 minutes still on the clock, and we can just take as much time as we need to go through them. I'll quickly look into the chat, but I think P, who submitted the question, also submitted it in the Q&A section. So I will just go through Q&A one by one and address these questions. Like if you have more, just feel free to add them in the bottom right corner via the Q&A tooling. And if you have any other ideas or support questions, like GitHub discussions is the best way to raise them. Like feel free to ping us as maintainers anytime. So let's start with the first one. Juan asks, a Langfuse MCP server to have cursor check traces, cast, and debug would be amazing. Have you considered creating something like this? That's a really good point. I forgot to mirror this to the public drop. Yes, we are at the an initial Langfuse streamable HTTP server for MCP, probably this quarter. Initially, probably focused on prompt management and getting initial like traces or metrics. We've already launched this for the documentation, which helps, for example, to integrate Langfuse into a project. So you can add this endpoint, and then, for example, if we go here to start tracing, auto install, like you can install the MCP server in Cursor, for example, one click, or in Cloud Code, and then you can copy an agent prompt, which is basically something we've wrote about that you can just copy paste to your IDE that then should hopefully, together with the MCP server, figure things out and add whatever code you need to make Langfuse work on your project. So this is something where we want to extend this MCP server also to data that's like within your project. But that's, yeah, Micha, who was on the call here as well, will be working on this this quarter. Then I hope, Juan, this answered this question. If you have any follow-ups, just feel free to raise a follow-up question.
No, perfect. Thanks, Marc.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I'm extremely excited about generally exposing an MCP server for more Langfuse data. I mean, it's kind of hinges on these kind of backend and data structure improvements that we're pushing, which will make the APIs way more way faster on the read side, which then makes like iteratively working with the data via an MCP server way faster. So you can basically prototype improving LM applications off of the data in Langfuse, off of the EVAs in Langfuse via the MCP server, and then probably bring more of this tooling in-house as like more like an in-app assistant. That's kind of like the idea. Then sharing from the chat, is there anything on the roadmap to upload files to dataset items? I know we can attach files to traces, but it would be nice to also do the same for evals. So basically multimodal data sets to then run experiments. This is something we are generally looking into. It's not a super near-term thing, because if you want to make this work, like many teams do this today by, for example, including like URIs of, for example, files in, for example, S3 blob storage within datasets. So generally for this kind of like offline eval experiment use case, this kind of works. But yeah, we want to, it would be nice if we could, for example, for image classification workflows or something, you could just like drag and drop 20 images into Langfuse. They all become single dataset items, and then you can like label them and then run experiments on whether you are able to achieve these kinds of like labeling values. I totally see the vision and where we want to go with this. I'm not sure whether we'll be able to add this over the next 3 months, because the pipeline of things that we want to build is huge already. But yeah, I know about this kind of requirement, and we are chatting with users about it. If you are excited about this, I think there are like a couple of open GitHub issues regarding this. Feel free to add your thoughts. Would love to hear from you, because this is generally something where I totally see the value and where we would like love to extend more functionality into the space. Or I can happily share like workarounds of how to make this work today, because lots of teams do this today. It's just not like an in-UI feature you can just drag and drop images, for example. Yeah, I hope this answers the question. Otherwise, feel free to ask like a follow-up. Jesse asks, what advice do you have for teams that want to create industry best practice guidance on benchmarks and evaluations for LM agents and multi-agent development for their organizations? Does Langfuse have resources that a team can use to build this within their organization and create training? Yeah, this is a great question, Jesse. Generally, we get like approached a lot by teams with questions about like how to do evals well, how to do observability well, how to like collaborate on prompts well. Generally, I mean, there are like a couple of resources I can really recommend. There's this AI engineering library, which is basically like our collection of really, really good resources to learn more about prompting, building agents, ops, and evals. And I would strongly recommend to check out these posts because there's so much content on the internet. A lot of it is kind of not so good. And these kinds of posts are extremely good. And I would recommend to, if you, for example, want to structure like some kind of course materials for your organization around evals, I would recommend to check out these evaluation related posts here. And I mean, the Langfuse evaluation section, like we try to make these documentation pages fairly accessible and like help with the mental model of how to think about like online, offline evals and this loop. And for example, on the experiment side, we also added, again, like new overview pages to understand how to think about the different options that are available. If you have questions that are not like solvable, basically based on the documentation and the library, I would suggest to ask a question to like us maintainers, either via the in-app chat if you're on Langfuse Cloud, or you can always like ask here also via the Langfuse support forum on GitHub discussions. Then I would continue. Another one from Jesse. Does Langfuse local hosting provide all necessary features for production use of benchmarking and evaluations, i.e., are there any features that are only Langfuse Cloud? Yes, basically, like Langfuse, I'll quickly share our overview page. Let me see. No, this was the wrong one. No, this is the right one. So when we go to the documentation and self-hosting, you can deploy Langfuse open source in your own cluster for free under MIT license. And when self-hosting Langfuse, you kind of run the same infrastructure that also powers Langfuse Cloud. So it's exactly the same product, same scalability. You can scale it with billions of events. You will need some kind of person who knows how to scale this and work with our documentation in order to achieve this. It's not like hands off, but like the underlying technology scales to billions of events you can use in production. And regarding like whether you can use this for free, generally, yes. There are like a couple of features that are basically more scoped towards like platform teams who we work with more deeply and partner more deeply. But as long as you're not a platform team, but rather you care about like all of the production features that Langfuse has, then these are all available in open source, and we really care deeply about that the product is completely usable without limitations, with like unlimited users, projects in open source. So if we go through all of these features, basically all of them are in open source, and they're just here on the enterprise side, more like if you want like support by the team, like, I mean, you need to pay. Otherwise, we can do support via GitHub, but not like we can't hop on calls if you use Langfuse open source. And we have like a couple of features that are more geared towards platform teams. So for example, like the Skim API, but like all core product is all open source. If you care about the reasoning for this, we released a blog post in June where we basically open sourced most of the product, where initially we had like more gating of features, but this was a bad idea. We really like open source, working with our community, and we want like the maximum extent of Langfuse to be open source. Going back to this, I hope, Jesse, this helped. In case it didn't, feel free to raise a follow-up or reach out via GitHub. Then Abhishek asked, any plans to enhance the existing dashboard module? Abhishek, if you have ideas of what you want to see with regards to improvements, I'd really like your take on this, because here, when we go to the Langfuse interface, just for everyone else to see this, there's like Langfuse custom dashboards where you can build your own custom widgets and then group them into custom dashboards. I think at some point it's like not, you need to know the data model in order to create widgets, which is a bit tricky. Obviously, you need to learn how Langfuse actually works in order to create meaningful dashboards. But yeah, if you have ideas of what you want to see, please let me know. We'd really like to hear it.
Sure. I'll make it quick. Maybe on top of mind, I can think something like, Marc, if you can click a widget and then show the drill down data of it.
Basically, like, I don't know, cost by model name.
You know, the total count
model
that you're seeing, Marc, the 161 or 696, you should be able to click on that and then show the underlying data.
Okay, so total, just like jump to the table basically of all data.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
That's what my
okay, yeah.
product team is interested in. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I thought like about something similar where like on all of these, I mean, this is like the total, which is usually unfiltered, where it just would land in the tracing table.
Mm-hmm.
Where I think what could be interesting here is we have these kinds of charts where, for example, we have here top 20 users by cost, like clicking on it and then filtering the whole dashboard by this user could be cool, or being like, okay, show me all of the traces of this user, or jump to the user page within Langfuse. I think this could be really interesting. This is not like planned right now, but I really appreciate, Abhishek, if you, for example, could create like a really short post on GitHub discussions for this, so langfuse.com/ideas, because I
Sure.
would love to loop in the one of the other maintainers that basically works mostly on data visualization in Langfuse to hear his ideas on it.
Sure. Will do. Thanks, man.
And maybe
Cool. Yeah, thanks so much for raising this.
if I can jump here, just 1 second, Mark. Sometimes I feel like the dashboards can be a bit limiting. Like one widget that I wanted to create was check the cost associated to each tag, for example. And I was not able to do something like that on dashboard. Maybe it's just that I didn't try hard enough. But I was thinking like if there would be a way to make it like maybe more flexible, something like that we could have like on the SDK, we create the widgets from there. Not really sure, but sometimes I feel like the dashboard is not flexible enough for some of our needs.
Yep. I hear you loud and clear. Basically, we will most likely this quarter support like filtering or grouping by custom metadata fields. So you can basically bring your own IDs, attributes, and then group by them, because currently Langfuse dashboards are mostly focused on Langfuse tags or Langfuse like user IDs, session IDs. We want to extend this overall to like custom metadata as well, which then should hopefully solve for this use case. In case it doesn't work as expected right now, please raise like a GitHub issue. Would love to dig deeper and see for example, see like an example of how it looks like today, because most things should work today, and happy to help you figure this out.
Perfect. Thanks, Mark.
Awesome. Then let's jump back. Reminder, if you have additional questions, if you want to queue some, on the bottom right corner of the screen, there's these meeting tools where you can, in the Q&A section, add additional questions that we can go through together. Dan asks, hi, I manage a Langfuse deployment with around 50 users. Are there any plans in Q4 to introduce custom user permissions or role-based access control? For example, we would like some users to be able to trigger dataset runs, but not create and modify datasets and prompts. This is a very common request as well. We generally want to look into, let's see whether we have like an issue for this open. I think so as well. Or, I mean, generally, I'll just take you to the ABAC docs. So basically, as a recap right now, users in Langfuse can have different kinds of roles, but these are like pre-built roles, where now the question is whether we can support custom roles, because these pre-built roles are mapped to some sort of like scopes of what they can do in the application. The same, by the way, applies to API keys, where currently there's like 2 levels of API key use. Either you can only ingest scores, or you can do basically everything read and write. And we are looking into like making this more customizable, both on the user management side, on the API side. We have some like design docs on this. However, we really want to get this right, as this has like huge usability and security implications. I can't right now commit that we'll get this done by end of year with like the current group of maintainers. Maybe things change, but like for now, we basically work with these kinds of like default sets of scopes that map to roles. I would really appreciate if you can add your thoughts regarding this. So Dan, regarding this to the public GitHub discussion, let me quickly see whether I can find it. Custom, I think it's custom roles probably. Yeah, there are like a couple of these. Oh no, I can't find it right now. Maybe you can create like a GitHub support thread for this, and then I can help you figure out the correct idea thread, or you can maybe find the idea thread right away, because then we can notify you once this is available, because there's like no timeline for this yet. but like I really want to keep you in the loop because I understand that this is extremely valuable when adding more people. Like when you have multiple projects, you can use the organization level API that we introduced to manage them. But if they're all in the same project, then like having custom roles would be really cool. So yeah, this is we are very aware of this, and this is kind of planned, but not in the very near-term future. Then Riley asks whether there are any plans to be able to add sessions to dataset items so you can write evaluators for multi-turn conversations. This is a great question and something that comes up repeatedly. Session evals Langfuse. Basically, like we don't have immediate plans to add this, but this is because generally, let me see now, where was that? Session. We recently published a guide on this. Let me see, N+1. Oh yeah, perfect. So basically in conversational applications, it's interesting how you can either run basically like a simulation, or you can run like more of a multi-turn conversation as like an N+1 problem, where you take a fixed message history and then just like evaluate whether the next message conforms to what you expect. Where when you run a simulation where you then have, for example, like an LLM that mocks the end user or whatever counterparty, then all of this can happen within a single trace. And at the same time, like for like an N+1 where you can take like a fixed message history, you can also add this. If you want to add a conversation to a data set, usually this works today pretty easily when we go, for example, to our demo project. And let me see whether I can find a session with more than one question. So we have our different sessions, and for these sessions, let's see whether we can find one that has more than a single trace. So here we have, for example, 2 traces, where then the second trace would be like a message that already has some history, where then when we go into the final response by the model, basically in the generation, we'll find the intermediary user questions as well, of like, how does Langfuse Python SDK work? And then user asks again, like, auto capture LLM client, I am self-hosted. When you add from here to dataset, this basically includes the whole message history of the of this kind of like conversation. So this data is usually captured within traces already, but yeah, we want to work more on the like data modeling side of data sets, and maybe adding directly from sessions to data sets can be interesting. But I think that would this solve for your use case, basically adding from a single trace that then includes the message history as memory? What do you think, Riley? Okay. If you don't want to unmute yourself, totally fine. I'll just check this off. If you have any questions regarding this, feel free to ping us via like the support forum on GitHub discussions. Then next question. Sean asks, are there any plans to expand the LM connection functionality? Where Sean asks, my organization is enforcing a token authentication method and deprecating a traditional Azure PEs that we are currently used to connect. If you have like feature requests regarding authentication with like the Azure LM APIs, currently there's nothing planned near term. However, if you can make a case for why this is relevant, please feel free to open a GitHub idea thread on langfuse.com/ideas with like some context on why this would be relevant, how this could look like, what you wish for as kind of like a rough spec, or like one of like the acceptance criteria for this to work within your organization. I would really appreciate it, and some additional context, and then we can look into this, because generally like model support across organizations, across model vendors is very important for us, because Langfuse should work with like any model that you use. Thanks, Sean, for the thumbs up. Then Upa asks, sorry if I missed this, around when this quarter can we expect the changes where traces isn't first class anymore? I mean, this should have, from like a UI UX perspective, have like a minimal impact. We generally will build a way more useful observations view, which helps you then to filter by agents, filter by like root observations. So we're currently doing lots of like UX iterations on making this happen. There's like no direct timeline for this yet. Probably at some point this will be like a I would assume we'll launch this like as like a beta view for some moments within this quarter, but generally we don't communicate timelines because like everything is like important. We want to ship it yesterday, but like at this scale, it's really important that it works really, really well, that there are like no problems with rolling this out, very clear communication. Like this will be like a big thing. I think generally like if you're subscribed to the email updates, so on langfuse.com/changelog, you can subscribe to like the newsletter. If you're subscribed to this, then you should get an email from us with like a larger update of, hey, this is what we shipped. APIs are faster now, and we have like a really nice new observation table. Cool. Then Dan has another question about evaluators. Are there any plans to allow hosting or managing evaluators outside of Langfuse? Currently, Langfuse only supports zero-shot evaluators. In our case, we have an evaluation agent that needs to perform a few tool calls, so we have to maintain that separately. Langfuse today, like many teams run Langfuse evals outside of Langfuse for their applications that trace within Langfuse, where on the evaluation side, let me see, we have this pipeline. We can find it. I think this is like guide external eval pipeline Langfuse. So basically there's like this notebook on how to run like an external evaluation pipeline where you can fetch batches of traces via the Langfuse API, run any sort of custom evaluation logic, and then push it back to Langfuse. There's one way of doing this in batches, pulling from Langfuse. Then over the course of this quarter, we plan to launch webhooks. So basically, Langfuse could notify you about any trace that matches a certain filter criterion that then notifies your, for example, like Lambda function that runs the eval and then pushes the score back. So this would be option 2. And 3, many teams run some sort of like message broker internally anyway. So they just listen to like the internal message broker and then just post evaluation scores to Langfuse. So these would be like the 3 main ways of running like external evaluation logic when using Langfuse for tracing. Yeah, we want to expand in this quarter what kind of evals we support within Langfuse natively. So more like regex-based or rule-based. But if you want like a more complex agentic evaluator that pulls in tools and uses external systems, I think you will always need to build something that integrates well with Langfuse and pushes the results to Langfuse. So I think these 3 main ways could work. So external pipeline that pulls, listening to the webhooks that we are about to launch this quarter that pushes to your eval, or listening to like an event system that's firing on every message to then push scores once you ran your evaluation agent. If you have any questions regarding this, let me know. Then ask a follow-up. But this pipeline requires me to re-implement the auto-eval features you have, sampling, filtering. Yeah, generally the Langfuse SDKs allow for filtering, so you don't need to filter yourself, but you could directly filter while fetching from Langfuse. I mean, once we launch webhooks, you can configure the filters within Langfuse and only get notified about traces that match your filters. So yeah, webhooks are best, and I think the next best thing is probably implementing this kind of like external evaluation pipeline. I'll quickly put a link to this notebook here in the chat in case you want to check it out. Yeah, if you have any questions regarding this, feel free to ping me via GitHub discussions. Then trying to get through the last questions on time. Jesse has a follow-up on the training material. Do they also contain supporting repos for digging in and experimenting with Langfuse with an AI application? If you want examples of how to use Langfuse together with AI applications, I would generally recommend when we navigate to langfuse.com, to the documentation section and then guides, we maintain lots of different kinds of integration cookbooks. So for example, regarding how to integrate Langfuse with the LightLM proxy, then we have like an end-to-end example of how this works. And these are directly runnable within Google Colab. So you can just click on run in Google Colab. And then you have like an interactive Colab that you can try this kind of integration. And we maintain this for most of the Python-based integrations. For JavaScript, we also use notebooks, but it's really hard to find like a web-based runtime where you can try them. So this kind of like nice way of directly running to Google Colab or opening them in GitHub is like Python only. But yeah, these would be like the examples that I would recommend. And if you want like an end-to-end example in TypeScript, like the example application in the documentation is also fully on GitHub. If you have questions regarding this, Jesse, regarding like more examples, feel free to ping me via GitHub discussions. Happy to try to sort something out and find something that suits your use case. Then we are nearing the end. Ronald asks, hi, it would be really cool if you can create a UI feature to add a count value for selected rows in the tracing page. Basically, say like 40 out of 50 selected on this page. Oh yeah, this seems like a really easy thing to add. So like selecting things and then just showing how many were added. I can totally see how, for example, here in actions, we just show like in brackets, for example, how many were selected, or here in the bottom left. I'll make a note and try to take this up rather soonish, because this should be like a really easy one to add. And I can totally see how this is useful when you, for example, want to add like 10 things to an annotation queue, for example. And a final one by Dan as a follow-up to the ABAC question. You mentioned you can create an API key that only ingests. I'm running on 3.103, and I'm not seeing that anywhere. No, we have like this public secret key split where you can, with the public key, ingest scores. This is, for example, helpful if you directly want to use our Langfuse web SDK in JavaScript to add evaluation scores from like a web front end. So, for example, adding user feedback directly to Langfuse without needing to create your API route for this. But currently, we don't support creating like narrowly scoped API keys yet. I just remember, I just mentioned this because this is related, like more customizability in our like authentication systems, both on API and UI. So this is both something we scope and plan, because I see great value on this. This is not yet live and not yet like planned for the very near-term roadmap, but something that's top of mind. Like these more scopable API keys are also already on GitHub discussions, like a very debated topic. So would invite you to also join that discussion. If you can't find it, again, please just ping me on like the GitHub support forum, and I'll try to point you into the right direction. And finally, Martin says, I like it as it runs, but I feel like the implementation is a little too simple compared to webhooks. Do you plan to add X Langfuse signature to experiments as well? So looking at this is basically the triggering of, like when we go in here, triggering of the experiment, where currently the experiments only support basically passing an additional body params and not allowing for a signature. There is an open GitHub discussion or issue for this already. So yeah, generally very much open for one, contributions on this, and two, there's something where the like sub-team of maintainers where we are currently focusing on evals, we know that this is like an idea and requirement. And for most teams, it hasn't been like a blocker yet, because you can basically include like a custom token in the runner config. But yeah, I agree that like a signature or something that's more resembles like a key that's actually like encrypted when stored would be cooler here. So yeah, totally agree, Martin. And there's like a issue to track this. If you can't find it, ping me via support on GitHub discussions. I'll try to point you into the right direction. Awesome. It seems like I made it to the bottom of the list. By the way, you don't need to join these calls in order to ask questions or raise feedback. Please, at any point, whenever you feel like it, head over to GitHub and share your ideas for Langfuse with us, or share your kind of like questions that you have. I really want to hear from you, and the whole team really likes to hear from you. And then, yeah, let's take it from there. I'm really excited about this quarter. I'm really excited about like everyone discovering Langfuse and the growth of the project. And yeah, just like thanks again, everyone. And if you want to work on this, we're expanding the core maintainer team, just like as a reminder. Otherwise, see you probably then in January on this call, or reminder, we host these community hangouts every other week. So if you just want to chat about the project and see where it's going, share feedback, share questions, like you can drop in every other week. Cool. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good one. Bye-bye.